Hello, historians, and welcome to our class together on American history. My name is Dr. Summer Sherland, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you this semester, either online or in person, depending on the kind of class you're taking. So you may see some of these videos in our class content, even if you are an in-person student, or if you're an online student, my hope is that you'll get to see a lot of these little, kind of confessional type headshot videos of me reaching out to you throughout the course of our time together. So the first thing I wanted to do in terms of getting us started with class content is I wanted to introduce you to the types of sources and the way we'll be using these sources over the course of our time together in this class. So let's get started. All right. You should see an infographic that says understanding historical sources. Now, just to begin, I did not create this infographic. It is cited below. Another history professor created this and crowdsourced it. So it's available online, but it is not my content. And I wanted to start by explaining that and saying that outright, because from the get-go, right, from the most important moment right now until the most important at the end of the semester when you take your final exam, source material and crediting your source material is crucial, right? So from the beginning to the end of the semester, that is something we will be focusing on quite a bit in our class together. So this infographic, we'll come back to it, but I just wanted you to scroll through it and take a look at all of the different kinds of sources that we might use and how we distinguish those. But these are the three statements that I want to focus on today. We are historians. These are our sources. We are students. This is how we get materials. And finally, we are scholars. We credit the people who teach us. That's what we're going to talk about today in this short video. So let's start here. We'll come back to the infographic as well. We are historians, and these are our sources. Now, you are probably not a history major. It's not really common anymore for students to just major in history. Maybe you want to be a history teacher, so you would be majoring in education. But if you're one of the rare out there who wants to be a historian down the road, that is awesome. Welcome to the craft. I can't wait to get to know you. But most likely, a lot of you that are watching this video are probably biology majors or engineering majors or business or communication or behavioral health, right? Like you're not looking to be a professional historian, and that is totally okay. However, I will refer to you for the rest of the semester together as historians. And that's because in the grand tradition that is the academia, right, that you are in, college, right, university level training, you are, the grand tradition is that you are an apprentice under an expert. So regardless of what classes you're taking, let's say you're taking a math class, a communications class, engineering class, and a history class, right? You are not just taking classes with math teachers or science teachers. You're actually taking classes from experts in the field, right? So you're taking classes from trained expert mathematicians, trained expert scientists, biologists, chemists, right? So as a student, you're an apprentice under this expert. It's elevated, right? It's beyond the level of like 6th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, 8th grade journalism, right? Like when you're in the college level, you're really taking classes from professionals in their field. So I'm a professional historian, right? I don't just teach history, I do history. And as students in my class, I will treat you as a colleague, right? I will treat you as a fellow historian because that is what you are. So we are historians together, regardless of what you want to be when you grow up. This is our task, right? This is our project. And these are our sources. Historians use lots of sources, but we tend to categorize them into two camps, okay? First, primary sources. All semester long, every single week, every single day you see me, I will not just be telling you what happened during a certain era in question. I will be introducing you to historical themes and proving that with primary sources, okay? These are materials from the time in question. First-hand accounts. A great example is the selfie you snapped of yourself this weekend with your friend at the Fry's parking lot. That's a primary source, right? That picture, that photograph is a snapshot in time. It was taken last weekend at this place with you. It's in your possession. That's a first-hand account, a primary source, okay? A secondary source is the analysis of historical information, including primary sources. So this is like what historians do. When I say I'm a professional historian, I look at primary sources and I analyze what I think happened based on those primary sources. But my opinions are rooted also in what other historians think happened, right? So this is a secondhand interpretation. So my best example, let's go back to that selfie that you took at the Fry's parking lot. Let's say then you show me your selfie and I look at it and then I say, oh, wow, Julissa must have gone grocery shopping this weekend. And then I tell the rest of the class that Julissa went grocery shopping this weekend. That is a secondary source. It's rooted in fact, it's rooted in content, right? I make some sort of contextual assumptions. It's usually pretty substantiated, but the primary source is the photograph and the secondary source is my analysis. Okay, so let's take a look at this infographic that's anchoring this page. Primary sources, how can you tell if it's a primary source? Well, one of the things to look at is the date of creation. So let's say we're looking at something that occurred in, I don't know, 1974. If the photograph is from 1974, or a journal entry or a letter or a newspaper article is from 1974, we can sort of assume, at least at the first level, that that's a primary source. But if we find, let's say we're looking at a magazine article or a website or a podcast episode about that event that happened in 1974, but that podcast episode was created in 2021, that's a secondary source, right? That's a really good key. Look at when this material was created. If it was created during the time in question, it's more likely a primary source. And if it was created decades or weeks or years later, it's probably a secondary source. I love this one. Take a look at the Dorothea Lange, this image of this woman, which was taken during the Great Depression by a woman named Dorothea Lange. This is a photograph, right? It's a snapshot. It was taken during the Great Depression in the 1930s. That's a photograph, that's a primary source, right? But on the right, you see this kind of textbook, a complete history of the Great Depression, right? That is a secondary source. If it was, especially we know if it was like written after the fact. So I'm going to give you an example. Right here. This is a book of historical images, right? The images themselves, this one of all these folks standing all happy in the Ahwatukee foothills, this was taken in 1938. That's a primary source. The book itself was published in 2006. That makes it a secondary source. So the book is a secondary source. The images within them are primary sources, okay? We'll keep working on this. We'll keep practicing it as we go. Now, one of the things that, that the creator of this storyboard indicated was there are some drawbacks or negative aspects of using either one of these sources. So the first is a primary source, right? Like that's a very biased piece because the person in question created it in the moment. They also maybe only saw like a brief snapshot. So that's why they say like eyewitness testimony in courts can be really troubling and problematic because maybe you only saw something for 2 or 3 seconds, but then the more your brain kind of creates connections or memories or sort of influences of other, based on other people's beliefs of what happened in that event, your perspective gets shaped very quickly by other people, whether or not it happened or not, right? So primary source can be very useful. It is very useful, but it also is still, we're still human, right? We're still flawed and doing the best we can, but we're usually making mistakes here or there. So primary source is really valuable because it tells us what the people in question were really thinking and experiencing, but you should take it with a grain of salt. And then on the right, drawbacks or negatives to using a secondary source, right? Well, this is still flawed because it's still human interpretation. And I want you to think of that as I lecture throughout the semester, I'm giving you a secondary source. I'm saying, look at all of these things that happened. Look at these primary sources and these claims and these arguments, and look at what all these historians think. And here's what Dr. C thinks. Here's what Dr. Summer thinks. That's still me, right? I'm still human. I'm still flawed. I'm still making my interpretations the best I can. Just like when you write me a paper or when you write, you finish an essay question for a quiz, you're not going to be perfect because you're still learning. We're all still learning. We're doing the best we can though. So those are the distinctions between primary and secondary sources. You're going to use these all semester long. So I encourage you to do a little bit of additional digging and research if you'd like, because it can help you in your quiz, but also it can help you kind of understand what these sources are and why they're different and how they're different. I didn't really identify the third piece, which is kind of, it's become a little bit more popular to consider this third source, which is called the tertiary source. We don't deal with those too much, but those are sort of like encyclopedia, general knowledge, reference material. Think of like your old-fashioned dictionary, Wikipedia. Those are kind of like general content information about the field we're studying, but not necessarily historical in and of itself. Okay. If you need to take a break, you can. We're going to go into 2 additional content pieces here, and then you will be asked to reflect and evaluate what you've learned today. So the second thing I want you to remember is that we are students, right? I'm a student, you're a student. We get materials from other places. I don't expect any of you, I don't expect any of my colleagues to wake up one morning and just know about the history of the civil rights movement, right? Like no matter how steeped in knowledge you are, you're still a student. And I think this is so crucial because all of us come from different perspectives. I have students in my classes sometimes that maybe know more about a particular topic than I do, and that's great, right? We are all students of American history or of a certain kind of history. And so what we do as students is we access materials, we analyze them. Sometimes the materials are my lecture, right? But sometimes they're textbooks, sometimes they're articles, sometimes they're primary sources, sometimes they're secondary, right? We gather these materials, we analyze them, we evaluate them, and then we talk about them. It's kind of like a really academic intellectual book club in a way. So I know sometimes it's like, I don't want to do that, but that's part of being a student, right? Sometimes you just have to make a claim. So you're welcome. All of our sources for this class are free and accessible through 2 places. If you can't get the materials through one of these 2 places, I will provide like a PDF. But for the most part, I mean, almost 98% of the time, we will use the following free websites for both primary and secondary sources. The first is the American Yop, which is an online free textbook. Online free textbook. And it's managed by Stanford University. So that's one of the best universities in the country. So you know that it's at least in one way or another substantiated, it's vetted, those kinds of things, right? So this is the American Yop. We will focus, if you're in a class on civil, like American history to the Civil War, we would be focusing on the left side, volume 1. If you're in an American history class that is after the Civil War, we'll be focusing on the right side, volume 2. So these are all of the chapters. History, I have to warn you, a lot of reading, okay? A lot of reading. But my choice or suggestion for you is that you get really used to skimming, right? Like read the first sentence of every paragraph. And if something catches your attention, then keep reading more, but otherwise you can move on. So here's what's great about the American Yop. Every chapter looks the same. They all start with like a beautiful, vibrant photograph or image or painting. They have links to all of their like sections within each chapter. And then at the bottom, they have primary sources. There you go. So Ida B. Wells Barnett, Lynch Law in America, 1900, for example, that's a primary source. She wrote this in 1900. She actually gave a speech, but this is the speech. This italicized piece is just like a historian's description of what this speech says. That's a secondary source, but the rest of it all here is primary source, okay? So that's American Yop. That is our free online textbook. It's got a ton of content. It's vetted. It's an excellent source. So I encourage you to take a look at that. The second is the South Mountain Community College Library. Now, it's not near as flashy as the American Yop when you click on it, but I am devoted to you being comfortable with our library by the time this class is over. So I really encourage you to get comfortable with this particular website. I would even bookmark it. You can see I have it bookmarked right here. So all of these links and sources and materials, I will walk you through these things when things are assigned, but I wanted to show you a couple of the databases that we tend to use. So there's one called U.S. History, Galen Context. I love this one. This is one of my very favorites. And so what I'll do is if I assign something to you, I will send you the link, but sometimes the link isn't great. So the full citation will be there and you can access it. So if it's in Galen context, you'll see, oh, it's in Galen context. I can go directly to that on the website. You can search here. You could just click on whatever they have, right? There's all sorts of stuff. And what I love about this is you can see right here, it organizes content via different type of source. So if you want a reference, that's that tertiary source. If you want a primary source, right? If you want more of a secondary source right here. I just really love this database. So just get familiar with this if you want to kind of play around. But one thing to note is that our library also has this tool right here. See this in the bottom left where it says questions? Just ask a librarian. This is a 24/7 chat with a South Mountain Community College affiliated librarian. You can get to them at 3 in the morning if you want. I would heavily encourage you to bookmark this page as well, because let's say I assign something and the link is broken. If you just email me and tell me that the link is broken, first of all, it's not. It usually means that our your security firewalls are higher than mine. But second of all, like sometimes the link might be a little bit wonky. Just reach out to one of the librarians, give them the full citation of the article, and they will help you find it. Okay? All right. Finally, we are scholars. We credit the people who teach us. This, along with primary sourcing, is probably going to be the thing that trips you up the most until you get it. And then once you get it, you're like, oh, wow, that was way less complicated than I thought it was. But I am very, 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 very picky about this. So heads up, all right? Every single time you make any kind of claim or provide any kind of fact, I immediately am like, how do you know that, right? How do you know that? Because remember, we are historians. We are not philosophers. We're not sitting around like trading information about what we think. I mean, we substantiate what we think with historical fact. Every single time you use information that you learned in my class or from materials that you reference that are relevant to that content, you have to give credit to the person who informed you of that. None of you woke up, I mean, maybe one of you, right? But like most of you woke up this morning with content knowledge about things that have nothing to do with American history. And that is great, right? Like maybe you know the full menu of Taco Bell by heart, and that's awesome, right? That is your knowledge. You don't have to cite that. I mean, I would still tell you, you probably should. But what I know for sure is that it's unrealistic that I would imagine or expect that any of you woke up this morning and knew about the Gilded Age so well that you could write me a paper or tell me a story or give me a speech or create a PowerPoint with relevant, meaningful, interesting, and historically accurate content about the Gilded Age without having gotten it from anywhere else, okay? So this is where you're getting graded, right? You're like, well, where am I getting graded? You're not just getting graded on content. In my class, you're getting graded on how you use sources, how you prove what you believe using historical materials. And you have to credit the people who taught you that. You did not just wake up and know this stuff. Maybe one or two factoids, that's great. But even if your mom told you something, right, you have to go substantiate that. That's what historians do. And even if you're a biology major, even if you are a criminal justice major, this class will help you be better as a future professional because you will find how to substantiate your facts, okay? Little mini soapbox over. Basically, every single time you credit or you use any content, you need to credit your source. And here are the things I'm looking for. I call them the big four. Author. Who wrote that? Who said that? Where'd you read that? Like who said that? Historians are obsessed with who said what, because the who determines what information we have, right? Their context determines what we know. If it's a historical expert on a certain field, we're like, okay, I'm on board with what this person says. If it's an eyewitness who was at the place at the time, we're like, okay, I'm totally on board. If it's a dissenter, someone who doesn't think this or that, it's important we know that too, right? Who said that? Who wrote that? So for example, Janet Jackson, okay? Janet Jackson wrote this. Title, what is the book, documentary, article, or website called? You can't just write like the URL, right? I need to know what that article is called. So for example, let's say we're citing Janet Jackson's Together Again, which is a song on her album called The Velvet Rope. Excellent. I have the name of the song and I have the name of the album. Date. When was it created? Remember, on our infographic, you can tell the difference between a primary source and a secondary source often based on when it was created. Was it created in the time in question? Was it created after the fact? So with Janet Jackson's, let's say it was created in 1997. Location. Where can I find this source and or where was it created? Now, many of you are going to function almost primarily online with your content. I'm not expecting a bunch of you to like be going to the library, pulling out different reference manuals and like, citing specific historical content from the library, because everything is online. But don't just give me the URL, because the URL is just a bunch of letters, often not even hyperlinked. I need to know where to find the source, where it was created, and everything else. So Janet Jackson recorded The Velvet Rope in New York City. And if you wanted access to the full album on YouTube, or not the full album, Together Again, you can click on this link. So the link is just the URL to the song, right? It's not the full citation. So here would be a full citation right here. Janet Jackson, author, Together Again, The Velvet Rope, title, New York, 1997, location and date, URL, location, okay? All 4 of those elements are required. Every time you cite anything, and every time you say anything, you should be citing. It feels very tedious, but once you get the hang of it, it's like, oh, I get it, okay? Now, before I let you go, one thing I want to note. I don't have a huge problem with you all using things like Wikipedia, Google Images, or even ChatGPT and other AI tools. It doesn't really bother me that you use these resources and these tools. That's fine. However, we are historians, right? We are scholars. We are students. Our job is not to just type in something into Google and then copy and paste, right? Our job is to interpret historical content, and a computer is not doing that for you. So let's start with Google. Let's say I ask you to find a photograph from 1928, let's say later, 1938. I want you to go find a photograph, any photograph from 1938, and give me the photograph and the citation. Probably 80% of you will do that fine. 20% of you or so will just write Google in parentheses or Google Images. Google Images is not a source, right? It is an artificial intelligence tool. It's great that you Google searched photograph from 1938 and one of those little photographs pops up. Let's just do that. Let's just do it. Let's look up 1938 photograph. Okay, awesome. I Googled it. Let's say you like this one, Louisiana Farm Girl. You copy and paste it and you say it's just a citation, Google Images. Yes, you found it on Google Images, but that's not who created it. Somebody took this photograph. And those of you out there who are musically inclined or you're artistically inclined or you're writers, right? One day when you create something for the universe, don't you want them to credit you? Same. So you click on the actual image, right? Here's what you get. Title, Louisiana Farm Girl. Date, 1938. G is Granger. I would have to do a little bit more work to find out who is Granger, right? Is this an artist or is this a contributing institution? Okay, and the URL is here. So that's a great example of like an AI tool is a source or a tool, but it is not an author. It is not an expert, right? The same is true of ChatGPT. When I ask you to analyze something, right? I ask you to watch a film and analyze it, or I ask you to read this source and tell me what you think. When you type into ChatGPT or a similar tool, I'm going to know that you didn't write that because I don't write like that. And no one I know writes like that. ChatGPT tools are not just ChatGPT, but like auto-generated writing tools are very flowery and kind of overwrought with like sort of like superlatives, like this person is extremely important, right? It's like, okay, so just if you're going to use those tools, use them to get started, that's fine. But then you need to do a little bit more digging and a little bit more refining to make it valuable to me as a historian, to you as a historian, but also to all of us as students in history and effectively when it comes to your grade. Okay, so just a few more little mentions. Those of you who like to listen to the book, I don't believe American Yop is yet at a point where you can just like click on it and listen. No, they don't have a listen feature yet, but the library does. So what you can do is you can download any one of these tools, see if they work with your browser to, or you can get like an app, right? That where you'll be able to listen to the chapter when it's assigned. So let's say you're on the bus or you're at work and you're able to put your headphones on, then you can possibly read along with us by listening. I'll try to also incorporate video and audio lectures as well for my online classes. So same thing, you're able to listen to it while you work. However, the library does have those kinds of tools. So let's go back to that US history and context, and I'll show you where you can find that. Let's say, you wouldn't have to click on all these things, by the way, you'll probably just have a direct link in the class. Let's say we want to read this about the Boston Tea Party. Check this out. This is just like a little, what is that? Like probably a one-page article about the Boston Tea Party. Do you see this icon where it says listen?
Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was a protest against British taxation.
Perfect. So whenever you see a library resource, bonus, you can listen to it instead of reading it on your own. All right, I have droned on long enough. These are our sources. These are how we use them. Just remember, we are historians. We use sources. We are students. We get those sources places, and we are scholars, and we credit the people who teach us, okay? Best of luck to you, historians. I look forward to seeing what you think of all these historical sources, and I am excited to get started with our class. Bye.